and welcome to News Desk. My name is Pablo Foley Elias.
And I'm Nehal Johri.
This week we are talking about Bangladesh once again. After weeks of student protests, around 300 people have been killed. Bangladeshi Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has stepped down and fled into exile. So let's get a feel for what's been happening.
Everyone is happy, everyone is cheerful, everyone is celebrating.
This is not just the end of the tyrant Sheikh Hasina. With this, we put an end to the mafia state that she has created.
We're watching the situation in the country very closely. We continue to call for calm and restraint.
No other government will be allowed, except the one proposed by the students and the people.
Whatever demands you have, we will fulfill them.
So we're continuing the discussion on developments in Bangladesh, and we want to bring in your comments. As always, so much has happened since our conversation just 1 week ago. And that brings us to the question we're asking this week. Bangladesh, new leadership, same old problems.
And helping us work through that are two seasoned news desk hands. DW journalist Binesh Javed is here, and Cherie Chan will be in the chat interacting with all of you. To get the reaction on the ground in Bangladesh, we'll be joined later by Prapti Taposhi. She's a student activist in Dhaka, plus analyst Michael Kugelman of the Wilson Center. He'll join us later from Washington, D.C.
So plenty of discussion, plenty of interesting chat, like we did last week. And the chat is already flowing. We've got plenty of questions and comments coming into us. And of course, let's not forget, we have a poll question, and Cherie can introduce you all to that.
Thanks, Pablo. Yeah, today we have a poll question for you. The question is, are you optimistic about Bangladesh's future? There are three options. Yes, it's a new dawn. No, there will be chaos. Or nothing will change. So please let us know what you think about that, and we will discuss the results later.
Thanks, Cherie. So let's just get straight to it, OK? So, Binesh, you've been following this story for us very closely over the past weeks. You were on the show last week. What a week, to say the least. Bring us up to speed.
Yeah, like an absolutely extraordinary story, I would say. A student protest movement that basically started as a protest against government job quotas, and I would say largely peacefully these protests started. These students, young people, faced a brutal state crackdown. And that has been the pattern of Sheikh Hasina's government in the last 15 years. Whenever traditionally there has been dissent, her government has used all its might and power to quell those protests or quell that dissent. But this time, the students retaliated fiercely because they believed that, especially, I would say the story is also connected with economics, because when 56% of the government jobs are reserved and economy is not doing well, students, young people feel they don't have any future. Only 44% of the government jobs they can apply. And in a country like Bangladesh, government jobs are considered to be quite stable and offer job security and financial security. And when these students retaliated, they were faced by state crackdown. The crackdown got so lethal, and the students retaliated, and all of it led to killing of more than 200 people, mostly students and young people. And briefly, we saw that we started believing that the protests have completely been dispersed because the state used all the military forces and the police. But then, as curfew loosened, as the crackdown became a bit softer, we saw that there was basically a revival of people on the streets. And this time, it was not only the students, it was civil society, parents, rickshaw pullers, like all people from all parts of the society became became part of this protest. What happened was, like 1 day before Sheikh Hasina resigned, the students had announced that the entire country will walk there will be a march to Dhaka, and there demands consolidated over time to one demand that Sheikh Hasina has to resign. And this was met again by force. We saw that pro-government bodies, support groups were on the streets, and we saw one of the deadliest days in Bangladesh in the latest protests. And after that, it was very quickly, we saw that the military basically told Sheikh Hasina they can't continue fighting at Bangladeshi people. And that was, I would say, the thing that led to the weakening of the government, and students, around 400,000 people stormed Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina's residence, and minutes before that, around 45 minutes before that, she fled. Yeah. So she basically, the military, we can say easily that military provided a safe
and we're seeing those images now actually being shown on our screens.
Yeah, these are the images.
Very dramatic scenes indeed.
Thousands and thousands of people had stormed the residence of Sheikh Hasina. The New York Times has published a report, and a local Bangladeshi newspaper. According to them, we can see inside of, in these pictures, the inside of the Sheikh Hasina's residence. I mean, these are extraordinary images, I would say, just show the divide, I would say, in the country between the leadership and the people, and how people have taken control of the powerful places where it's impossible for any common person to even go near to places like these.
Let's bring it forward a little bit, Beanish, because since those images, which are just a few days ago now, a lot has happened, right? And let's bring in Muhummad Yunus, who let's talk a little bit about him, because he's essentially the leader, right, of the interim government that they want.
So after Sheikh Hasina fled, the military announced her resignation, that she has resigned and she has fled, and that the military announced that there will be an interim government, because I would say the students had very clear demand that there should be an interim government, and they appointed Dr. Yunus, Nobel laureate, who won a Nobel Peace Prize in 2006 for his work on microfinance, and they see him as a figure, who can represent Bangladesh internationally, and also can represent Bangladeshi people. And so he would, what we know is he's going to head the government. He was interim government. He was in Paris, and just before leaving for Bangladesh, he did speak to media. We can have a listen to what he said.
Yes, I'm looking forward to going back home and see what's happening there and how we can organize ourselves to get out of the trouble that we're in. Thank you very much.
When will elections be held, do you know?
Well, I'll go and talk to them. I'm just fresh in this whole area. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
So we're just seeing images there of Muhummad Yunus speaking just a short while ago in Paris, Beanish. And actually, Cherie, you want to come in, right?
Yeah, right. Since you're mentioning about the interim government, we have a comment here from Ice Frosty asking, how long do you think this interim government will stay for and why?
Okay, this is what is making people very nervous, because interim government, and Dr. Yunus has publicly announced that he does not, as of now, has ambitions to rule the country. So his job is to have this interim government for elections. And last week, I think most of the people who voted for our poll, they wanted new elections, if I'm not wrong. So there's a huge demand from Bangladeshi people that there should be free and fair elections, which many people believe that the last 15 years Bangladesh has not seen.
Well, Beanish, we're going to be talking to you more throughout this show, obviously, but I think it's time now to bring in our first guest, Prapti Taposhi, who's a student activist and is joining us from Dhaka. Thanks for joining us on News Desk, Prapti. First and foremost, I just want to ask you, how are you doing? How are you feeling about what has happened in the past few days, past few weeks?
Thank you so much for inviting me. I would say I have never lived these kind of days in my entire life. I'm 24 years old, and the previous 7 days, I would say that this is one of the most historic moments of my life. And I guess the whole entire youth people of Bangladesh will support me in this statement when I say that this is one of the most historic moments, because believe it or not, we have seen a tyrant, we have seen a fascist regime to step down. And previously, we have started the movement in very peacefully, a young-led movement, the students-led movement, and we have seen that the fascist regime of Sheikh Hasina, she has enabled the police, the border guard Bangladesh, the military personnel to kill our students and young people. And this has become so, that there was so much bloodshed, and lots of our brothers and sisters have sacrificed their lives for this victory. And then we saw that not only students, but also the whole nation of our country, there were so many writers, there were teachers with us, there were rickshaw pullers, there were so many people of different livelihood. They came down to streets to support the students, to support us. And if I to quote a very famous quotation that one of our martyrs' mother, Abu Said's mother, said from Rangpur, that if you can't give job to my son, that's okay, but why would you kill him? This is that question that the Bangladeshi people have been asked to the fascist regime, to the former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, that why would you kill us? Why do you suppress our freedom of expression? And we saw that just the day before the former Prime Minister have resigned, we have so many people gathered together in Shohid Minar at Dhaka, and there were other people in the various other areas of Bangladesh as well. And the police attacked brutally that day, and I myself have seen so many dead bodies, and we walked with dead bodies in a rally that I can't even properly express the emotion that we felt then when we saw the dead bodies, and when we found them dead, when the doctors declared them dead, we brought them in a rally and we marched together along with the dead bodies to Shahbag, where the police attacked themselves and they were killed in Karan Bazar and Bangla Motors. So those were the scenarios I have never imagined in my life, that I would have to live in a free nation, in a free state. And after that, I thought that when we declared the march to Dhaka, I thought that will there be people? Will the people of whole country, will really they march together and they will come forward to end this tyranny? And to my utter surprise, I saw that they really came, and the police have tried so much. There were no transportation, there was nothing, but still the entire population of Bangladesh, they came to Dhaka. There was millions of people in the roads of Dhaka, and we were at Shahbag when we heard the news that the former Prime Minister has fled and she stepped down, and the whole country, the whole nation, they were crying in emotion, they were laughing, they were dancing, they were singing, and we knew each other, and we were hugging everyone. So I would definitely say that this has been a victory. We are calling this our second independence. And since 15 years, we have experienced so much injustice. We have experienced so much bad things, and now we have finally came to that day that we are experiencing that the young people, the whole population of Bangladesh has finally made the audacity of Sheikh Hasina to step down, to make her to flee away.
Yeah, Prapti, we're seeing the people of Bangladesh. I just want to jump in there. We're seeing some images of those celebrations and those scenes that you've been describing in what sounds to me, and I'm sure the rest of us here, an incredibly emotional time for you and many other Bangladeshis. You've mentioned a lot of different areas there that I want to actually come back to. One is Sheikh Hasina is gone, but there's a system that she oversaw. Is it still there? How difficult do you think it is going to be to dismantle that system? And with regards to that, how do you see accountability for what has happened?
First of all, yes, the fascist prime minister has gone, but the fascist system is still there. And we believe that there is so much more to done, and the interim government which will be formed, that interim government has so much to offer and so much to do, because still now we have been saying that only Dr. Yunus, who will be leading the interim government, that is announced, but the entire interim government are yet to be announced. So we believe that all the fascist system that she has created throughout these 15 years, you see, there has been so much reformation of constitution. There is no freedom of speech. There is no freedom of expression. And that has already been discussed, that in my life, I have not even get the luxury to vote because there has not been a proper election. So there is so much more to done. And I think that the former prime minister has fled away, but the accountability, she have to experience the accountability, the liability of her wrongdoings, of the murders and of the bloodshed that she has created. So we, the people of Bangladesh, wholeheartedly want that the former prime minister Sheikh Hasina to so that she faces the accountability, to face the liability that she has created. And we also believe that the interim government, which will be formed, as the students have already asked for Dr. Yunus, and he has been leading the interim government. So we are a bit hopeful, but yet there has been so many chaos. A chaotic system is right now in Bangladesh, because there are a complete lawlessness system when I'm talking about, because the army has stepped over, but till now, since the day Sheikh Hasina has stepped down, till now, there have been numerous attacks on minorities, numerous attacks on various people's houses, their buildings, their shops, etc. And the army seems not to be doing enough. The army could have, I believe that the army could have stopped that if they wanted to, but they are not doing that. They are not doing enough. And if I like to add,
Prapti, can I just stop you there quickly? Because I actually just want a little bit more of... Could you explain a little bit more what you mean about these attacks on minorities, just for an audience who perhaps isn't so familiar with Bangladesh?
Yes. What I mean by this attack, that is, there have, after the resignation of former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, there has been several attacks in the religious minorities' houses in different areas of Bangladesh, like Hindus, and we have even experienced an attack of the indigenous people as well. So we don't know yet who are committing these attacks, or we don't know that if they are the former ruling party like Aumi League or any other party that has been created these miscreants, or that has been attacking the religious minorities. But the thing is that this is the fact that they are facing the deadliest situation right now. Just because I was on the podcast, so many people of religious minorities told me to speak it out loud, because they are still living in tension. They are still living in danger. They don't know. They have no proper security of their life. So I want to ask to the Bangladesh Army, because they have stepped down the lead of the army, Waqaruzzaman. He said that he would take care of us, our families. He would give us security and social safety. But where are they now? The people of Bangladesh are still in tension. They are still in suffering. There are still robberies, anarchies, looting happening. And I would say that the army is not doing enough. And another thing I would like to add with that is another politician party, that is the Bangladesh, the BNP. We have seen today that the BNP has they have declared a mass assembly, and there are so many people, and they talk to the general people. But we again got the information that the exactly same kind of scenarios that the student wing and the youth-led wing of former ruling party Aumi League, those have been created, like the looting, the showdowns, and the power practice of politics. The youth and students wing of BNPs are giving the same kind of vibe to the students, and the students are very much resisting it. So I am very much hopeful, because there has been a new era, there has been a new dawn, because the students, they don't want the Awami League, because they have seen the deadliest actions of Awami League, and they don't want the BNP either, because they have seen that that the BNP has been created these kind of scenarios earlier. So this is the time where we look for a new leadership, where we look for a leadership where everyone, every smaller portions, every minorities, and everyone will be heard, and inclusive and a very much expressive, where will be freedom of expression, where we'll be finally be able to express our democratic rights and a proper and free election. So this is what the normal students and people of Bangladesh look forward to.
Prapti, I wanted to ask you more about that. So what exactly are the students demanding now? I believe there are 9 demands in place, but if you could just walk us through some of them.
There were 9 demands previously we have stated to the government. And the funny thing is that even after so many people of us have died, the students, the student protested so peacefully that we only wanted the former Prime Minister to apologize, to simply take care of her actions, to simply take the accountability and liability of her actions, and her ego and her audacity and the audacity of the former ruling party Awami League's leaders. They did not even care to simply apologize to the students. They did not even care to come to a discussion to the students. They asked us to discuss to themselves after so many bloodsheds have already done. So there were 9-point demands where we wanted the Prime Minister to apologize to the whole country, where we wanted several leaders of former ruling party Awami League to step down, to resign themselves. But all of them concentrated into one demand. When we saw that even after we are doing the protest so peacefully, we have seen that the Prime Minister has no interest of protecting ourselves, have no interest of taking accountabilities of our actions, and they kept shooting. They kept committing open fires. They have committing disappearance of the people. They have picked up the students from their home. They have attacked the students from their home. There has been numerous raids at night. There were so many nights that I could not even sleep because I was in my window and I kept waiting that when are they're gonna come and take me away. So when I'm speaking for myself, I'm speaking for the whole student population of Bangladesh, and these are nights that we have experienced. And after all these scenarios, all of the people of Bangladesh, not only the students, but also the other livelihood people of Bangladesh concentrated into one demand only, and that is the resignation, the stepping down of the dictatorship and the fascist regime. Because till then, we have already experienced that the fascist regime, which has been suppressed ourselves for 16 years, they have no liability, they have no accountability to be in as our government anymore.
Prapti, I want to jump in there and ask you a question about Muhummad Yunus. How do you see him as the person who will be leading Bangladesh in the short term at least? And also, do you see the students also forming part of a new government?
First of all, Dr. Muhummad Yunus is elected, or he was the first choice of the students, of our student leaders. And as you might have already known, that Dr. Yunus have experienced himself so many wrongdoings and so many injustice of the former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina herself. So I would say I am hopeful, but as I'm a very optimistic person, I would also like to add one thing, that Dr. Yunus should know that the entire population of Bangladesh is looking up to him right now. And not only the entire population of Bangladesh, but the entire world is looking up to him right now. All eyes on him, that how he will lead the interim government and how the interim government will work. Because after 16 years of wrongdoings, injustices, we are really hopeful to get a free and to get a democratic statement. Until now, Dr. Yunus has wholeheartedly declared that he wants to get back the democracy in Bangladesh as well. So I'm very much hopeful, but I would also like to add that the people of Bangladesh, they have experienced so much injustice and they have kept resisting until the injustice have done. We have a brief history of resisting, and we are a nation who will do anything fearlessly until our demands are met and until we get a free and democratic life. So even if it collapses, even if it does not act as per our expectations, the people of Bangladesh, the student of Bangladesh, will keep fighting again. They will keep resisting again. I myself will keep talking again. And we will continue our fights until we can get the proper democratic rights to express ourselves.
Prapti, you keep saying one word. You've said it a few times now, which is hopeful. So that's encouraging to hear from you. And I like that you said that you're very positive and optimistic. So that's also great to hear. Nehal, did you want to jump in there?
Yeah, we actually have some comments coming in on Muhummad Yunus. A user, Ishtiaq, said it's necessary for Dr. Yunus to be the Prime Minister for at least 5 years. Another user, Manof San, said Yunus is 84. He's older than Joe Biden. What useful governance can he provide? And what's he got? Zero experience. So I really just wonder, why is he so popular?
See, there has been a popular proverb that says that whoever is enemy to your enemy is your friend. So Dr. Yunus, I have said before that Dr. Yunus has experienced himself so much wrongdoings of Sheikh Hasina. We are assuming that he won't bring away those injustices, those he experienced himself to us again. And yes, he is old. He is 84 years old, and yes, he has no experience of leading a country or leading a governing body. But he will not the only one who will be the interim government. He will be leading the interim government, but we are assuming there will be 15 or 16 people, at least 10 to 12 people who will be there to his as his advisor, and there will be so much. And I am expecting that there will be a conclusion, a mix-up of different livelihoods of different occupation of people, and I am very much hopeful. I really want so that the minorities and the women, that their voices are also heard, and the interim government will be formed in a way that so the inclusivity and the whole country, the whole population should be heard as well. So we are hopeful of Dr. Muhummad Yunus because that as he has been very popular to Bangladesh because of his microcredit programs and because he has an international image. And we also think that he won't do, hopefully, he won't do anything that will create any negative image of him internationally. So there has been this topic of sensation of roaming around as well.
I think that's a good way to finish our discussion with you today, Prapti. Very interesting talking to you. Thanks for sharing what you've been through, your experiences, and how you see things in Bangladesh and how you see things going into the future. We wish you the best of luck, and I'm sure we'll be speaking to you again on DW. So thanks for joining us today. That was a student activist. Thanks, Prapti. Prapti Taposhi, student activist, joining us today from Bangladesh. I'll put this to the table. Guys, that was a very interesting discussion, to say the least. Binish, what's your takeaway from what Prapti had to say?
I absolutely agree with her. Following this story from weeks now, I have very strong feeling that this time, the way she said that even if Dr. Yunus fails, they will not stop. The students will not stop. And I think the powerful people in Bangladesh have a very clear understanding that this time they cannot mess up. And I would say that if we trust Dr. Yunus and the statements that he has given, it seems that he says that he wants elections in Bangladesh. He believes that a free and fair election in Bangladesh is answer for the problems. He's very, very optimistic about the student movement. He has publicly expressed, he has talked to international media also, and he really believes that that Bangladeshi students right now are hungry to be acknowledged. They are hungry to be, because they are talented. And we are talking about a country where 45 million people in Bangladesh are young people. It's not a small number. And they are talented, they are educated. We know that how these people contacted media. The moment this student protest started, they mobilized, they did everything, I would say, that they could to contact international media, I know overseas Bangladeshis, they contacted their universities. They tried to create awareness about this story. I would say that there were some international media that did pick the story. Many jumped later when we saw the fall of Sheikh Hasina, but also because strategically, for many international media, Bangladesh does not make the headlines. It's not a very important story.
Well, Binish, you're from Pakistan. Nehal, you're from India. How has this been covered in Pakistan, for example?
The government is really scared.
Okay.
There were no official coverage of what was happening in Bangladesh because basically the young people are revolting against powerful people, against who they believe are corrupt, have not been sincere to the country, and they see the government as they're panicking because they see that what protesters on the street can do. But I would say that even though the mainstream news channels are not showing this, the government is not saying anything, but Sheikh Hasina, Bangladesh under attack, a student protest, these hashtags have been topped trends in Pakistan for days now. So there's a lot of solidarity from young Pakistanis of what Bangladeshi students are going through. And I would also say that there is an understanding. I mean, the first day I saw these pictures of the protest movement, I could really understand why these students were protesting. They're frustrated. The government is so powerful and so disconnected from the reality that students are hopeless. But in Bangladesh's case, it's a very inspiring story that despite the crackdown, brutal crackdown, like people knew they will be killed, people knew they will be arrested. After that, we saw a revival of protests. This is extraordinary.
People
that
coming together,
people had
unified.
so much of, and that shows that how frustrated they were, or how angry they were at the loss of their fellow students, and their anger was real.
We're going to be talking more about this throughout, but we have our next guest coming up in a sec. But just briefly before we bring in our next guest, who's Michael Kugelman, tell us what's the situation? How's it being covered in India now?
In India, it's been a very, very cautious tone. So authorities, the Indian government was very supportive of Sheikh Hasina's government in Bangladesh. And so with that gone, they've been a bit hesitant to criticize it. At the same time, they also don't want to interfere in what feels like Bangladesh's internal matter. So they're sort of waiting to see who ends up being the next political leader. And that is the other point. They don't want to be too outspoken on the movement itself because they don't know who the next leader will be and they don't want to alienate other future leaders. Right. And we have to remember one very major vested interest for India and Bangladesh is that they share a massive border. We're talking about over 4,000 kilometers of land shared between India and Bangladesh. Not all of it even has a fence. So it's really porous. And we know that troops have been strengthened there. The whole region is on high alert. And so there are a lot of concerns about the situation from Bangladesh spilling into India.
So keeping a close eye. Sorry,
okay, if you want to talk to the guest, I just had like a quick comment because Dr. Yunus has also spoken to Indian media, and he basically criticized the rule of India when India says that it's an internal matter, and as Nehal has explained, that it's a very tricky situation especially for Prime Minister Narendra Modi because he has been such a close ally of Sheikh Hasina, but. I also think that now, as India has very, very close strategic security, trade relations with Bangladesh, India eventually will try to work out with whoever forms the government.
We'll talk about this more, but let's bring in our guest now, Michael Kugelman of the Wilson Centre, who's been patiently waiting for us to go to him. Michael, great to see you again. You were on the show just last week talking also about the situation in Bangladesh. Things have moved quite rapidly, as we've been discussing today. I want to know, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm still trying to digest it all. It's been a remarkable few days. Of course, it was a terribly tragic few weeks. And indeed, I think the biggest concern is the reports of continued violence and unrest. And indeed, I know you mentioned earlier the reports of attacks on Bangladesh Hindus. This is very concerning. I think that the immediate priority for whoever is in charge now, which essentially is the army at this point in time, is to try to rein in the law and order situation. I think it's difficult to have meaningful conversations about a peaceful transition if you don't ease the violence which continues to play out. Though certainly the last day or so has been less violent than what we saw on Monday. But no, this is just remarkable what is happening in Bangladesh. And I think when I was on your show the last time, I think I said that what we've been seeing is simply unprecedented. I mean, nothing like this has happened since 1971. Sheikh Hasina faced her most difficult challenge and crisis, and she didn't survive it, as we now know. But look, it's going to be a really tough road ahead. And I know you've already been talking about this. There's so much uncertainty about what's coming. There's a huge power vacuum in play. I mean, when you have someone who's in power for 15 years, who was able to stare down resistance so easily, often by deploying force, and now she's gone and her party is essentially out of the picture, what are you left with? It's just going to be a real big challenge. I think it is encouraging that things are moving forward with the interim government. My understanding is the army chief has said that tomorrow it's expected to be sworn in. I don't think we yet know who is going to be in it, other than Muhummad Yunus, of course, leading it. But I think that one of the big concerns moving forward about this interim government is its time frame. Will it have a time frame? Will it really be an interim government? And I think the longer that you have an interim government with no indication as to what could come next, such as elections, then I think fears will increase that there'll be a likelihood that the army will essentially try to maintain a role in politics, which is not good for democracy. But I would argue that Bangladesh's army today is a lot different from Bangladesh's army 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. It seems less inclined to want to play a role in politics and seems willing to defer to the idea of a civilian-led interim government, which would certainly be a good thing.
Well, actually, let's talk about Muhammad Yunus, that interim leader. Do you have much thoughts on how you see him as the person to be leading this change that's taking place in Bangladesh at the moment?
I mean, quite frankly, it is a very political decision in the sense that, we overseas, he's seen as this celebrity, this remarkable figure, global laureate, pioneer of microfinance. But, in Bangladesh, as you know, he's been a bit of a lightning rod. He was a very sharp critic of Sheikh Hasina and her government, and he was saddled with serious legal charges that were likely politically motivated. Sheikh Hasina and her party hated him. And I'm sure that she is absolutely disgusted with the fact that he is now going to be leading this interim government. I think that given the political players that are going to be taking a central role in the coming days and weeks in Bangladesh, I think he would be seen as fine. There'd be trust in him. There'd be respect for him. The student leaders themselves had said that they wanted him to be leading this interim government, and they got that. Clearly, the army and the other key parties here, the BNP and the smaller parties that will be involved in the interim government, they're okay with this. Otherwise, I imagine he would not be in a position to be ready to take up this role. But, he is a political figure. And in a very polarized polity, a very polarized political environment that you have in Bangladesh, there are going to be people that don't want him to be playing this role. He does have enemies in Bangladesh. So it's going to be a bit of a tricky situation. I don't think that he should be viewed as a long-term player in Bangladesh's very uncertain political future. But even if we were to think about that, when you look at the history of dissidents becoming leaders in governments, there's a bit of a checkered history. There are some signs of success. There are other cases where it doesn't work out very well. But I think it is good on the whole right now that he is going to be taking this role, just because he will have the support and trust of many of those that will be serving with him in this interim government.
Michael, I'm going to put this our discussion to the table here. Beanish, you have a question that you want to put to Michael.
It's not actually a question, more of a comment. As we have been discussing, there is definitely a vacuum of power. There's no, I think it would be fair to say that there is no political party right now in Bangladesh that enjoys wide support of people. And it is not, I think we can assume that we maybe in future we may see even the student protesters. It's speculation, but it's also possible because they have become such a popular movement in Bangladesh that they may even join forces, or they may themselves become a political party and then gain a lot of public support. Because right now, many people are supporting them. And that is what I see when I look Bangladesh from outside. I do see that there is a power vacuum. There is no figure that the whole country can look up to. And for now, Dr. Yunus is sort of like a unifying figure, but the country definitely needs leadership in the long run.
And as well, going forward, the issue of accountability is going to come up, I'm sure. So how do you deal with the issue, Michael, of accountability, considering what has happened and what's happening at the moment and what the country would like to achieve going forward? Because, you know, there are many players here and you said it before, you know, you have a divided country. How do you make sure that that doesn't go down, we'll say, a negative path and you can bring everyone in to move things along peacefully?
Yeah, great question. And just briefly to respond to Binish's very important point about the protest leaders being a potential political actor, that is a critical point. I'm not sure they know if they want to join politics down the road, but there's a chance they might. And if we want to talk about the possibility of elections and when they might happen, if the student leaders do want to, say, form a new political party so that they could participate in elections, that'll take time. And so they might have an interest in not seeing elections happen anytime soon, just so that they have time to mobilize, develop a political party to put themselves in a position to be competitive electorally down the road. So to your question about accountability, yes, I mean, I think that for the sake of bringing the country together, there needs to be some type of process, certainly some type of investigation at the least that would, probe what happened over the last few weeks. I mean, there have been so many reports, there's so much evidence that Hasina security forces engaged in egregious levels of brutality, even by the unfortunate standards of her security forces, given what happened over the last few weeks. We've seen the really brave reporters in Bangladesh that have come out with investigations showing, for example, that, of the 200 deaths that have been confirmed as of August 1st, 39 of those people had been killed with gunshots to the head. And these are peaceful protesters. My goodness. I mean, those are egregious levels of brutality. Anyway, so hopefully there will be some type of an investigation. The problem is that the Awami League is not around anymore. They're gone. But, you're talking about security forces that are still on hand, that are still there, the army, but more importantly, the police and the paramilitary forces who were really the most active in the crackdown. Would they be willing to cooperate? Would they not? Would that lead to more tensions and make it more difficult for the country to move forward? But I do think there has to be some type of investigation. It is nice to see, it is heartening to see that a number of political prisoners have been released over the last few days since Hasina left. Some very prominent people that had been forcibly disappeared, as the euphemism goes, they've been released. Hopefully this will continue to happen, but absolutely, I think there needs to be a reckoning. And hopefully whatever this government looks like will orchestrate some type of investigation with cooperation from the security forces, which will certainly be a bit
Michael,
of a challenge.
Can I ask a question, Mike? And Michael, so we know that Sheikh Hasina is in India right now. And do you think India will cooperate in helping in investigation? What role can India play right now when there are growing calls of a fair investigation into the killings?
Right. Well, I mean, there is an extrajudicial treaty between India and Bangladesh. So hypothetically, India could agree if there was a request for her to be extradited. I don't think she's going to be in India long enough for that to happen. This is why she doesn't want to seek asylum in India, because she would worry about that very possibility. Look, India is very close to her, as you all had noted before. The Prime Minister of India is very close to her, very fond of her. I'm not sure how cooperative the Indians would be. I think that India is much more concerned about the issues that you mentioned earlier, how to develop new relationships with the players that are going to become more prominent politically. India had put all of its eggs in the Awami League basket for so many years. India is really going to be worried about border security issues with the risk of more people coming into India from Bangladesh if there's extended unrest. So I'm not sure how cooperative India would be. I imagine it would try to be. And let's be very clear, as I think was noticed, New Delhi has a very strong interest in cooperating with the new government in Bangladesh, whatever it looks like. India has to have workable relations with Bangladesh. It doesn't have a choice. It's going to be very difficult to do that, but it would get off to the wrong foot if it stonewalls and refuses to cooperate with some type of investigation that the authorities in Bangladesh would like it to help with. So it would have a strong interest in being helpful, but again, it's very loyal, I think, or the Indian government is very loyal to Hasina and her party. And even with Hasina's family, particularly her son, saying that she's done with politics, she's not going to come back. You know, she is older, but you know, as we know in this era, there's a thing about older political figures staying in the ring, so to speak. So one can't rule out her wanting to come back down the road. And I imagine that the current government in India would be mindful of that and not want to do anything to alienate its relationship with Hasina and her family.
Michael, what I want to do is I actually want to bring in, moving out a little bit from the region and actually bring in the United Nations, because they actually commented as well. So we have a soundbite from Farhan Haq, who's the UN Deputy Spokesperson. Let's take a listen.
We stand in full solidarity with the people of Bangladesh at this time, and we call for full respect of their democratic and human rights. And ultimately, regarding what's happened so far, there's a need for a full, independent, and impartial and transparent investigation into all acts of violence. The international community must make it clear that at this pivotal time, there will be no impunity.
Michael, I want to put that to you. How do you see what the UN Deputy Spokesperson had to say there?
These are very critical comments from the UN, and I think that the UN is a critical player here for two reasons. One, I mean, as you all know, there's very strong evidence, thanks in part to work conducted by Deutsche Welle, I believe, that there were UN-marked vehicles that were being used by the Hasina government in the crackdown. That is really serious. The UN wants that's very significant and concerning for the UN. The second issue is that, as we all know, Bangladesh has long been a very robust contributor to UN peacekeeping operations. It's one of the issues that Hasina used to stake her legitimacy, to sort of look and say, look, you know, we've been very effective in these peacekeeping operations. We're always very helpful, and so on. So the UN has leverage, and I think that it might hope that it can use that leverage to try to compel Bangladesh to agree to an investigation. Certainly if the UN itself wants to conduct an investigation, or if the UN wants to play a role in an investigation in Bangladesh, you know, it has that option of threatening to reduce the opportunities for Bangladesh to participate in these peacekeeping operations. Quite frankly, given what we saw the security forces do in this most recent crackdown, that I think might make a number of UN member states uncomfortable about the idea of Bangladesh continuing to contribute to these operations. So that all goes to show that if Bangladesh is cooperative, if it conducts an investigation, if those members of the security forces that did bad things, illegal things, are arrested, if justice plays out, that would help Bangladesh's prospects. It would enhance its reputation in the eyes of the UN. It would make it easier to maintain that prominent role that it wants to play in UN peacekeeping operations.
Michael, you're in the United States. Beanish touched on it before, that perhaps this story didn't get the same level of coverage that perhaps other countries around the world would get with regards to what was taking place. How has this been covered in the US, and what has the reaction actually been from the government there?
Yeah, so in terms of coverage, you're right. During the early weeks of the protests, it wasn't getting all that much coverage here. I mean, for obvious reasons. There's so many other things going on in the world, and of course, back home in the U.S., there were major developments in the presidential election campaign. So, you know, I think that, you know, the Bangladesh crisis was viewed as simply just another internal crisis somewhere far away. But things changed over the weekend when you had that particularly violent day when nearly 100 people died on Sunday. And then, of course, when Hasina stepped down, that's when the coverage picked up. And I think that the main focus, the main angle, not just seen in media coverage, but also coverage by analysts, including myself, was, wow, that came really quickly. You know, we might have thought that Hasina's days were numbered, but many were surprised about how quickly she resigned. In terms of how the U.S. government has responded, you know, not much has been said publicly, and I think that's being mindful of the dicey, volatile situation on the ground in Bangladesh, not wanting to do or say or do anything that could imperil U.S. interest or the U.S. personnel based in Bangladesh. The U.S. had raised its travel advisory system to level 4 for Bangladesh, which is the highest possible level, the same category as North Korea and Afghanistan. And U.S. government security alerts had pointed out there had been violent clashes right outside the U.S. embassy area. So I think that the U.S. has wanted to be very careful and very quiet. But, the U.S. does face a bit of a public diplomacy challenge, I think, just because you do have, particularly in social media, a lot of ridiculous conspiracy theories alleging, U.S. sponsorship of this protest or some type of U.S. role, which is not the case at all. But and this, you certainly are getting this from a number of prominent influencers on social media in India, particularly on the Indian right. So that'll be a bit of a challenge. But
Michael, but I would argue that I don't think it's that simple. That's my opinion. If it was, for example, if the same killings had happened in a country like Iran, I think the reaction of the international media and the reaction of the Western world would have been completely different. For many, many days, I mean, the international, world powers were already seeing what was happening. These 200 deaths that we are talking about, I'm talking about 20th July, 21st July, 23rd. We are on 7th August right now. And they were almost mum, I would say. They were not criticizing. And I think that is why a lot of people see a lot of hypocrisy here happening of how the Western world treated these Bangladeshis. I mean, we had one guest and he said that when Mahsa Amini was killed, what happened to Mahsa Amini in Iran, the entire Western media picked up that story because it was also the governments were very critical of what was happening in Iran. And Abu Saeed, the first student who was killed in Bangladesh, we had a guest journalist, Tasneem Aslam, and he said he was our Mahsa Amini. But then the world didn't really care.
And if I can just add to that, it's not just Western countries, but we're also getting a lot of criticism in our chat for just Bangladesh's neighbors. For instance, we have Sheikh Ismail Ahmad Saim saying, why did India stay silent on the violence when students were protesting against the quota system? There was no comment then.
Yeah. I mean, yes, India, I think, we also understand the complication with Awami League, but it's very surprising how the Western world, who talks about human rights, and now we see that when something like this happens, because of many different reasons, because of business interests or different other interests, they stay quiet.
How do you see that, Michael?
And if I may, if I may, absolutely, I acknowledge all those points, and I think there might be a double irony at play here. Bangladesh was a country that the Biden administration had singled out in terms of bringing a lot of public attention to concerns about an election that would not be free and fair. And this, of course, made Sheikh Hasina very angry. It made India very angry. Mm-hmm. So Bangladesh is a case that the U.S. had been paying a lot of attention to and directing public attention to its concerns about rights and democracy. And yet, as you note, you don't really have much focus from the U.S. But I would say this, and I'm sure you'll remember this, that the U.S. government actually went silent in the weeks before Bangladesh, actually several months before Bangladesh's election. It stopped that public criticism, which was, I think, a strategic decision, partly out of concerns about security risks. But also, I mean, the U.S. has taken a bit of a different tack to Bangladesh since the election. President Biden sent a letter to Sheikh Hasina saying he looks forward to a new era in relations with Bangladesh. Other senior U.S. officials said the same thing. So I think that there was a bit of a course correction in the policy. Of course, it ended up not going the way that the U.S. might have thought it would, given that Sheikh Hasina is gone now. But anyway, I absolutely acknowledge those concerns and complaints about hypocrisy, for sure.
Michael, you've only got a few more minutes with us. We appreciate you joining us today and giving us your insights. But pushing things a little bit forward, obviously there are a lot of questions that we're trying to answer at the moment, but it's going to be difficult. How do you see things playing out over the next few months for Bangladesh?
Yeah, it's very difficult to answer that question. I think that the interim government will be very much the focus of attention. I think it's definitely going to be in place for the next few months, at least. I suspect that there will also be a lot of discussions within those that are running the show as to what to do about the question of elections. I don't think any decisions will be made about elections, but I think that there will be discussions about those. I also fear, I hope I'm wrong, but I also fear that we will continue to see some levels of violence and attacks. With any luck, this trend of the last day or so will continue, where we have fewer attacks each day. But what I do worry about is that there's a security vacuum. The police, the paramilitaries, most Bangladeshis don't want them on the streets. They're so angry at them. But you need someone to maintain law and order. The army might be seen as the entity to do that, to be there, to serve as the protector, to dissuade people from being violent. But I think the army itself is hesitant to take on that role. So I fear that the unrest and the violence has not ended. I am cautiously optimistic we'll see less of it. But even one incident of violence is too many. So that's something that I'll continue to be concerned about.
All right, and we'll be keeping a very close eye, all of us, on what's happening in Bangladesh. Michael, thanks so much for joining us today. Michael Kugelman of the Wilson Center in Washington, D.C.
Thanks for having me, folks.
All right, so first and foremost, how do you feel about... actually, we should go to Cherie, really, and ask what the comments have been saying. Give us all a moment to think about what Michael has been saying.
Yeah, people watching this stream have been really vocal, and they are discussing among themselves a lot of opinions. There are some things that I think we touched on a little bit, but we didn't really dive deeper into. Many people are commenting about the future political changes in Bangladesh. For example, there is someone whose name is MD Tariq Islam, saying that to change the political culture of Bangladesh, we need systematic reform, and that could take some time. Otherwise, the established political parties can exploit the system and create a new fascist regime. And there are also people asking if students and workers would be included in the new government. So I think many people are actually concerned about the new
makeup of the new government, yeah, and who the players there, and how do you kind of integrate everybody into that change and that new political system, essentially, that they want to implement?
Yeah, I think it's a very, very sensitive time for Bangladesh right now. Things can go in the right direction and things can go in the wrong direction. And the machinery, the state machinery, all the government people who are employed there, many of them are Sheikh Hasina's supporters. And how then the interim government will deal with all of that? Will it get opposition? Will it get how will it be able to change or move towards a democratic process? I think it's a very, very challenging time for Bangladesh.
Certainly. And Cherie, we have this poll, of course, and you've been keeping an eye on it too. How's it looking?
Many people have voted. We've got 1,000. I mean, I haven't closed the poll, but so far at this point that I'm speaking, we've got 1,393 votes, which is a lot for us usually. I'm happy to say that, it looks optimistic. I mean, let me repeat the question.
Is,
exactly. Are you optimistic about Bangladesh's future? 78% of the people say yes, it's a new dawn. 14% of the people think no, there will be chaos, and 9% think that nothing will change.
All right, OK. So overall, pretty optimistic. And of course, from our first guest, Prapti sounded quite hopeful. She said it several times, the word, and quite optimistic about the future. But let's actually go to some of those questions actually that you put to us before about how Bangladesh is going to find its way to bring everyone in. I mean, this is going to be the challenge. It's a challenge for any country that is going through a situation similar to Bangladesh. Our guests have touched on it a little bit. Binish, how do you see it?
Yeah, I think we can be a bit hopeful. We can be hopeful because it's the young people. They have a lot of energy. They want change, and that's a lot of energy in Bangladesh. We're talking about millions and millions.
45 million, you said there. Yeah, it's a lot of people.
So I think if anybody should be scared of them.
But this is what fascinates me so much, and you're talking about it now, that the fact that young people in Bangladesh can wield this amount of power. I was just comparing it to other South Asian countries where maybe there's also discontent towards their own government. But I feel like the general attitude is, we can't do anything, they're the ones in charge, you just sort of don't try to change it. And here's Bangladesh proving that that's not true.
Yeah. We have actually an interesting comment here from Salahin Siddiq, who says, we don't want an election quickly. We need time to fix the institutions of the state and reform so the fascism cannot continue. BNP seems to be wanting election too early and take advantage.
I think the latest we know is that BNP wants election within 3 months, or very soon. And I think the new head of the interim government, Dr. Yunus, and he has to make this calculated decision of what will happen in the country. But then if you don't have elections within like a limited time period, and there are fears that, as Michael Kugelman has said, that maybe the military might make an arrangement where they let the caretaker government run, and then the military is controlling the government from behind. And that is also not good for democracy. So I think elections is something that should happen. And Nehal, I agree with you, and I think what is, in my opinion, has happened in India is at least there has been regular elections. So in Bangladesh, at least for 15, many, like, our guest said that she never voted. So for 15 years, a government is ruling the country, and by opposition either boycotts the election, or when Awami League wins, they win with an extraordinary majority. So it just seems unreal that these elections were free and fair. And that is, I think, what maybe really, really frustrated the students, because in Pakistan we also have like rigged elections, but there is still some democratic movement, some process going on. But here in Bangladesh, we see a very, very brutal tenure of Sheikh Hasina, where dissent was complete, like opposition, BNB, it's an opposition in tatters. Most of them were in jail. Khalida Zia, now she has been released, but she was critically under house arrest. So any dissent was completely crushed for so many years. And I think that really frustrated the people.
Talking about the election, there is also a comment about the constitutional change. Someone said that we need a constitutional change to deny any person to be PM for more than 2 terms. So maybe it also relates to what you talk about. There is really not free elections, or they don't see any chance that they can vote at all.
So these are questions, of course, that are going to be asked and talked about, I'm sure, in the next weeks and months. We're going to be having to wrap up our show today. We've had plenty of discussion, plenty of questions put to our guests and our panel today. But before we go, I want to get final thoughts, briefly, if you could, Beenish.
I'm very optimistic and I'm hopeful for this country. I have experienced some really talent, like I've interacted with very intelligent, talented young Bangladeshis, and I believe this country is going in the right direction.
Hopeful.
Yes.
Nehal?
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing what happens when Muhummad Yunus is perhaps the leader of the interim government. I think it's very rare that you see so many young people rallying behind one leader. Like Michael Kugelman said, there are people who don't support him, but that seems to be quite a small part of the population. And I mean, considering the work he's done with these microcredits, it's understandable why people respect him so much, but I really want to see what it is that he would do politically.
And Cherie, you've been keeping an eye on the comments, so how have you seen it?
What I think is that it's just really impressive how the people's power really changed something, because, I mean, we see protests everywhere, but it's not like every time when protests happen, something really changed. But here we really see that what people are asking for really happened, so it's really impressive.
Really impressive stuff indeed, and our guests have brought us some. It was pretty emotional with Prapti, talking to her and just seeing how she's experienced what she has over the past days and weeks. And as always, thank you for joining us. Thank you for sending us your comments. Thanks for joining us here on DW News. And of course, you can watch this if you want again on our YouTube channel. I want to thank our panel today. Beenish Javid, as always, a pleasure having you here. Nehal Johri, my co-host, and Cherie Chan, who's here keeping an eye on all the comments. And from everybody in the team joining us in Berlin, and of course our guests, we'll talk to you very soon. Take care.